And we talk a lot about humanity, like how do you be a human that has AI as your assistant? It's not about replacing humans.
All right. Well, hey, friends, welcome back to the Christian Podcaster. This is, as always, I'm your host, Eric Nevins, the official podcast of Christian Podcasters Association. I'm so glad that you are here, that you're listening and enjoying this episode. We, as always, try to give you something new, something to think about with your podcast to take you up just that little bit, right? I keep hearing this phrase more recently, 1% better every day, right? Like, I don't know, I'm sure somebody's put that on a t-shirt and a coffee mug somewhere. I don't have one yet. I need to get one, but that's it, right? Just a little bit better. And I hope that this episode is going to help you maybe get a lot better, right? So that's going to be great. I'm excited to have this conversation because we have with us the CEO and founder of Capsho, Deirdre Tshien. Deirdre, welcome to the Christian Podcaster. I'm so glad that you're here.
I am so glad to be here. I've been waiting for this, Eric. You've been holding me off a bay, and I'm like, please, when am I going to get on this podcast?
Well, you know, I like to play hard to get.
On the podcast.
That's how it is. Well, I appreciate that. I'm glad that you are here and we can just have this conversation because you're doing some really cool things in the world of podcasting. And I want to know all about that. I know we're going to have lots of questions as we get going. But first, I want to know a little bit about you and kind of how you got to what you're doing today. So tell me, like, where are you from, and were you always interested in tech kind of things? When did you know that was going to be your future?
Oh my gosh. I don't think I ever really knew. I never know what I want to be when I grow up. To be honest. You know, for me, so grew up in Australia physically, in Sydney, and, you know, my parents were first migrants. So with that comes a lot of the stereotypical, you know, pressures that we hear about and expectations. So, I had to actually, you know, get really top grades, and I go to the best school in the state, and go to a good university. And my parents wanted me to become a doctor, which did not happen because I just hate science. And so I did a law degree instead. And then my corporate career, my previous life was really in banking. So I was working in the biggest investment bank in Australia called Macquarie Bank. All right. And that was my first time that I actually got introduced to AI and technology and the reason for that is because I had joined this newly formed team called the Innovation Team. And my whole remit in that team was to explore emerging technologies and how we could apply those technologies in banking. And so I was looking at things like blockchain and, of course, AI. Now, this was like almost 10 years ago or something and so you can imagine, like, AI has been around for a while. And at that time, it was not what we know it as now, you know, ChatGPT, and, you know, really, and very accessible as well. It was it was quite nascent. And it was very much about a specific use case that you had to find. And so that was my first foray into just learning about the applications of AI from a business perspective, but didn't really do much with that at that time. So, and even then, even though it captured my imagination and I was like, oh my gosh, you can just tell that this thing is going to make such an impact on all of us. At the time, I actually didn't think that was the thing that I was going to do or pursue or go into, because in the meantime, I actually opened up another business with my husband, and it was actually in hospitality. So we started dessert bars in Sydney. It's called the Chockpot. Yeah, we grew that to 5 locations, and we also opened burger restaurant alongside that. So so hospitality, totally different. Yeah. And then end of 2018, we actually found out that one of our store managers had been stealing from us like hundreds of thousands of dollars. It was insane.
Oh, no. Yeah. That's not good. I'm sure that threw you for a loop. What was the effect of that?
Well, that was actually the catalyst for us to really step back and think about what it is that we really want to be doing. I think for me, I never thought that I was going to be in hospitality. didn't love it. And even my husband, who is the chef, he's like the brains and the creative director behind all of the things that we were creating. He was also starting to get a bit disillusioned by the whole industry and just how hard it is really to grow and maintain a hospitality business. So we used that to kind of, it gave us a little bit of a kick in the backside and we used that to really rethink everything. And at the time, I was exploring a fashion technology idea with another co-founder, Bonner, who is also co-founder in Capsho. And we decided that there was no better place to explore the intersection of fashion and technology than New York City. So that's what we did. In 2019, we moved to New York City to explore this fashion technology idea. And we failed it 4 months in. We decided that it was just not a big enough problem. And so
well, how did you know
that?
How did you know it wasn't a big enough problem? Because that's an interesting question.
Yeah. So we really hit the ground running, going to all different, so we had a hypothesis that we had two different types of customers and users. One would be like college students, and the other would be young professionals on Wall Street. So we actually went to like Columbia University campus, we went to NYU on Wall Street. We were just talking to a lot of women, talking to them, but also showing them prototypes of what it was that we were thinking. And, a lot of the feedback was like, oh yeah, this is cool. But you can always tell sometimes. And when it comes to we have this, and we actually learned this when we were in the innovation team at the bank, there's this concept of currency. And I think too much, a lot of times as entrepreneurs, sometimes when we're trying to test or survey our customers, we think that just getting feedback that's positive is good enough, but it's actually not. There's this thing called currency, and currency can the highest form of currency is obviously money. Like if people are willing to give you money, then that's the highest form of currency.
Actual
scaling
currency?
back, it's also yeah, exactly. Actual, yeah. But then scaling back, it's like if they're willing to give up time, if they're willing to give up email address, like there's other forms of currency that you can use. Yeah. And when we started to we were at that stage, we were like, okay, what's the actual currency that people are willing to give us? We just weren't getting it. And so even though in talking to them, they were like, yeah, this is a problem, it just wasn't a big enough problem that they would be willing to change their habits for quickly. And that's when we knew we don't have the runway to be able to maintain, the not being able to go at speed, not being able to change their habits at speed. So that was when we decided to stop exploring that idea.
Gotcha. That's really interesting. And I think it's an important piece. Certainly, obviously it matters for a business, but I think us as podcasters can learn something from that as well, right? Like, hey, are we getting the traction that we need? Because then the question that you were asking, are we meeting a need, and is there enough of a demand here? Absolutely. That's a great question for us to think about. I love that. Okay, cool. So how did you end up starting Capsho then? And by the way, can I just say something? I can, it's my show. I saw recently that you guys have started using this, not maybe you've been using it for a long time, but like Capshovian, or is that how you say it?
Yes, Capshovians.
Is that because you guys are Whovians? Like, is that are you borrowing that?
We are kind of borrowing. So what happened was at Podfest this year, we had a couple of our Capshovians come. It wasn't termed Capshovians at that stage. So James McGuigan and Rayshawn Hager were at Podfest, and they were just hanging out with us the whole time at our booth. And they started talking about, oh, wouldn't it be cool to have like a name for, and they were kind of going back and forth. And James is I don't think he'll mind me saying that he's a little bit of a nerd. He was like, what would be cool? Like Capshovian, like, like kind of like Doctor Who, like the Who, Whovian. Right. And I was like, oh, okay, that's cool. But they were kind of debating because I think someone else was like, what about Captionistas? And anyway, there was like this whole poll that was going. So we put it to the community. We were like, what would you want to be called here? And Capshovians won. So look at that. Cool. I'm seeing a couple of Facebook. All I see is Facebook users, so I don't know who it is. But I love that you are a proud Capshovian, you guys. This is amazing.
We have a couple of them here. I love that. Okay, well, anyway, I saw that, and what you don't know is I've got a sonic screwdriver over here somewhere. That's so I'm a Whovian. So I instantly recognized it as a play. And I was like, oh, I love that. Okay. Anyway, so back to the real question. I saw that. And I wanted to make sure I found out the scoop on that. How did you start Capsho? And like, how did you decide that this was because podcasting, I know that one thing you're trying to help people do is get discovered, which is one of the big problems in podcasting. How did you find that? And tell us that whole story.
Yeah. Okay. So basically, when we failed our fashion technology idea, we actually fell into agency work. So we're working with e-commerce businesses, helping them with their digital marketing. And then COVID hit. And, just like a lot of other people, we had to transition fully online. And for us, what that looked like was starting a coaching business, helping e-commerce businesses with their digital marketing. And so it was that at that point that a mentor of mine told me that I had to start a podcast because there's no better way to find your voice and also amplify your message than a podcast. So that's what I did. I was like, okay, I'm going to figure this podcasting thing out, even though I had no idea what I was doing.
Love it.
I just got this really cheap microphone off Amazon. I didn't know how to edit anything, but I was like, you know what? It's fine. We're not trying to go for perfection, even though every cell in my body was screaming to be like, this needs to be perfect. But I was like, no, we're going to ignore that. And we're just going to launch this thing imperfectly. And so it did. And it was great. It was great to learn how to do the podcasting things that I didn't know how to do at all, like learning a new skill. But very quickly, it came to a point where I was like, right, so my business isn't growing, my podcast isn't growing. And now I not only have a business that I have to sort of discovered, but I also have to get my podcast discovered. And I was like, what in the world am I doing? I was just all over the place. And so I had to really get honed in on, I guess, really streamlining the process from how my podcast would connect to my business. And by creating a bridge, which was at the time a challenge that I was doing. And then I was like, okay, so the one thing that I'm going to actually be promoting or trying to grow then is my podcast. Because if I can get people to my podcast and if I can actually get them to connect with me and come to know, like, and trust me through my podcast, then they will they'll come to my challenge. And then that's when I will invite them to my program. And so that was what I did. And it took a lot of trial and error doing it. It took a lot of burning me and my team out because I'm going to be honest, like doing all of that and creating the amount of content that we're creating from the podcast really sucked. Am I allowed to say that on this podcast?
You can say whatever you want.
Awesome. Okay. Yeah. It was terrible. And so that was kind of what led me to start to think about how can we do this in a smarter way. And I remembered back to my corporate career days of this thing called AI, and it just started to click into place around how we could help make this process not only efficient, but hopefully to levels of quality that would actually almost be maybe not quite as on par as maybe a human doing it, but the trade-off would be there so that with that efficiency and a bit of human touch.
So what I heard you say in all of that was that you had the problem, right? And then you were like, hey, how can we fix this? And how can we do it? And then you started to figure out other people probably have this problem as well.
Yes.
Is that right? Okay, cool.
100%. Yeah.
All right, cool. All right. So one thing that I noticed, I've been using Capsho a little bit and I've been looking at your website, obviously. I love how you call it an AI copywriter, right? Like you're copywriting. One thing that I'm not sure a lot of people, especially when you're early in marketing and kind of getting into that, you don't understand the value of copywriting, right? What copywriting is and how to do that well. And it takes a little time to become an expert in that, right? It takes a little bit of effort. So why should podcasters think of promotion and promoting their show as copywriting, and what's the importance of that?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. Oh, okay. So copywriting is at its core the words that we use. So to be fair, even when we're podcasting, this could be counted as a form of copy, because, you know, and when you look at it being translated into transcript, etc., that's all words on a page. And what that essentially boils down to is this is how you are going to start to become visible to your audience. Like, we get so caught up when we think about branding our businesses about the colors and the logo and the tagline, like that tagline, and like that's all copy. And what we forget sometimes is that we just put things out onto the internet with no real intention. And we forget that that's all copy that needs to link back and that needs to message up to what it is that we're trying to be known for, especially in the expert space. So copywriting is so vitally important because we need to be able to nail so many things. We need to be able to nail the value that we provide. We need to be able to nail the audience we're trying to reach. When we need to be able to nail the fact that we can help solve a problem that they have. Like, there's so many things that come into copy that at the core of it, like from a marketing perspective, that's almost one of the number one skills that you need to be able to have in order to have effective marketing and messaging.
Right. Yeah, it is. I think it's really important. And it is all those things where you're thinking about who your audience is and the language that they use, right? And learning how to do that. And so I know I've learned even from my experience using Capsho that it helps you do that. And it often will use things that I hadn't thought of, but were in there, right? Or kind of thing. I was like, oh yeah, that's actually really a good summary of something. And I really appreciate it pulling that out, you know?
Yeah.
Which is really good. Okay. So describe for us kind of the process for podcasters and what their experience is and how using Capsho will help, you know, kind of get them faster in their production and promotion.
Yeah, for sure. Okay. So if we think about the podcasting process, there's kind of, in my mind, kind of 4-ish steps that we go through. So the first is kind of like idea generation. It's like, oh, okay, this is a great topic, or this is a great guest that we can get onto the podcast. The second is the actual recording of it, and the scripting and recording. The third is the publishing. And then the fourth is the promotion. And by the time, you can probably tell just, by the time we get to the fourth step, I don't know about you guys, but I am just so exhausted that I just don't even want to look at that episode again. I'm like, and then I have to promote this dang thing. So like I get it. It's a lot. And so what Capsho helps is really in that fourth step, how do we promote this episode and amplify that message that you have to share with the world, that your audience needs to consume super efficiently and effectively. And so Capsho is built by humans, and specifically marketers. So we inject a lot of the things that we learned along the way. Capshovians here, you would know that we have things like content honey traps in there to create curiosity. We're always optimizing the content that we create so that it is there designed to compel, to draw your audience in, and depending on what it is that you're using that asset for, it's to provide value. That at the end of the day is what we want to be doing. And so, a lot of times, like what I'm starting to realize that Capsho does, apart from the marketing part of it, is actually starting to create your content legacy. Because a lot of times, for example, a podcast will go live and it's awesome. Mm-hmm. Like we get a huge spike, that week, and then it kind of dies down. And the great thing about what it is that we're realizing that Capsho does is that we can actually have that episode or that content or that message just last that much longer. And so, yeah, I'm really excited about helping people create that content legacy through using Capsho.
I think that's really important. I talk about legacy a lot. I think, we sometimes think of content as something that we create and we throw away, right? We put it out there and then it's gone. And I guess in some platforms, that's what happens, right? It just it disappears.
Yes.
But I don't know if that's true for podcasting. And I often think about how maybe, as long as I'm paying the bill, my show will stay out there. Even on my personal show is halfway there and I'm going to do 10 years of it. So I got 3 years left, and I hope that it lasts even after that. And maybe if you take a long view of history, maybe some people will find value in it even, in many years from now. So I think about legacy Like that is right up my alley. I love that. Okay. What's a feature of Capsho that you think is underused or underappreciated?
Oh, wow. Gosh, where do I start? Okay. I'll start with the template. Yeah.
All right.
Okay. So with, when we launched 2.0, which was, gosh, a few handful of months ago, we basically, the reason why we did that was because we wanted Capsho events to interact with their content more. And this is important for a few reasons. So one, it's important because just fundamentally, you need to be completely across all of the content that you put. You know, we spoke about copywriting and how important that is. And AI can only get you so far around the messaging and making sure that you're able to talk to your audience in the way that you know that they want to be spoken to, right? Mm-hmm. So an AI only gets you so far. You need to interact with it from that perspective. But the other reason why it's really important for you to interact with it is because we don't know what's coming with the regulation of AI. What I would see or hazard a guess in is that it's might not be enough that, you know, and a lot of times it's around ChatGPT and things like that, that you prompt or that you're using it in a certain way. It's really about how much effort did you personally put into making sure that whatever the AI produced is yours, fundamentally at the end of the day. So that's you actually getting in there and making the edits and, you know, making your tone of voice, all of that. So we could see this coming, and we can see it's still coming. So with 2.0, the reason why we transitioned and we made it almost counterintuitively a little bit more, we created more friction in a way in the platform, was we had this concept of creating templates so that you can structure your content differently to, like, my podcast description would probably be structured differently to yours, Eric, differently to, you know, whoever else is on here. And so we put those in. So I think a really underutilized feature that we built into 2.0 is actually creating your own templates, structuring your assets different, your content in a certain way. So yeah, that's probably what I would say there to answer your question.
Yeah, absolutely. I think those templates are really helpful, right? So I have 2 different shows, and I've got two different ones because I'm gonna talk to those audiences differently, right? Which is great. I love that. Okay. All right. So we talked about that. I'm curious. You mentioned about AI, and I think this is really fascinating. One of the interesting pieces, right, is this is very unregulated, and there's going to be it's not yet really litigated, right? But some of these things will happen, and some of the definition of what is yours and what you can claim and all that kind of stuff will come out. I know some people are watching AI and they're a little bit afraid of it, right? And they're like, well, okay, I saw this movie. I don't know if this is a good idea, right?
Yeah.
Is AI something to be afraid of? Is it something we should be thinking about? And like, how do you think about it? Answer that question. And then my follow-up is, how do we think about it ethically?
Yeah. Okay. So I think about it in terms of like short term and long term. I'm going to be honest, I do have a little bit of a dystopian view of AI and what it could potentially become. And but I think that right now it's coming, regardless of whether or not we want it to it's here, and it's not going anywhere, which means that we have a decision to make here and now. Do we lean into it, or do we shy away from it? And it's kind of one of those, it's like a tide, right? It's a tsunami. It's not going to stop. So you either like get on the boat, or, you know, you kind of, you know, drown in a way. And that's how I view AI right now, which is that for people, if you don't want to fall behind the pack, you need to be leveraging AI. You need to. It's kind of like, think about when, you know, the Industrial Revolution came about, or like machinery. You know, if you're the farmer who is still trying to do everything by hand rather than, you know, getting the tractor, or, you know, like actually investing in the new technology, could you imagine like how quickly you would fall behind all of the other farmers who are actually being way more efficient, way more productive with the tools that they have on hand? That's what's happening now. Like, if you don't use this tool, the tools that you have on hand now with AI, then you will be left behind, unfortunately. So that's kind of like right now, what I would say to that. Now, we can talk, about longer term views and stuff like that. That's kind of like crystal ball gazing. So, but that's, definitely if you're not using AI, I would get in on it.
Well, I think that's true. And I guess as an AI company owner, I'm not surprised to really hear you say that, but I'm curious how do you think of it in terms of ethics for people? Cause I know, we're a Christian group. We want to honor other people, and there's a certain ethic to that. How should we think about that? And maybe not. And maybe if this is not your world or whatever, but I'm hoping you've thought about that in some way.
Yeah.
So how do you think about that, the ethics of using it, how we can use AI well,
yes.
Whether it's Capsho or not, how do you think about that?
Yeah. So, okay. So ethically, what we always come back to is still keeping your humanity. And we talk a lot about humanity, like how do you be a human that's that has AI as your assistant, rather than, because it's not about replacing humans. That's not what we're here to do. That's not even what I think a lot of AI companies are here to do, to be honest. But in all of the places that where you need to maintain your humanity, you need to. So, for example, when I spoke about that podcasting process, so step 1, step 2, step 3, step 4. In that step 2, where you're actually, for example, if anyone scripts their podcast episodes or, and when they're recording, my view is that has to be you, right? So I will never go to an AI and be like, script my podcast episode. I will never say, and give it to, a voice cloning software to be like, now record my episode. And I will never give it to a video cloning software to be like, now make it look like me. That's just fundamentally, ethically for me personally, not something that, because, and at the end of the day, the reason why is it's not even because of, to be honest, an ethics thing. I mean, yes, there's a big ethics component to it, but as a marketer, right, I think about it from like, well, if I am here to I'm creating content for a reason, and I'm creating content because I want to connect with my audience. I cannot expect my audience to connect with me if something else is scripting my episodes, if something else is voicing them, and if something else is looking like me. That's just not how connection is created. I make a lot of mistakes when I record. I use a lot of ums and ahs, and I'm constantly chopping up my sentences because another thought comes into my head, and I'm like, I know that I do those things, but at the same time, that's what makes me human, and that's what creates a connection with my audience, and they either love it or they hate it. Yeah. And so that's at the core of it, what I always come back to, which is how do you keep your humanity throughout all this whole this flood that's coming?
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a really interesting take. So what I hear you saying is that we can use AI to enhance the things that we're already doing, to maybe automate some things that we're doing. Somebody's in the comments, Paul's saying he takes AI as kind of the first draft of his content, gives him some reminders and keywords to include. I love that. Things like that as a way to do it. And it's similar, I think in some ways. It's a technology revolution for sure. And going from a horse to a car is completely different, right? And completely changes the way that we interact with the world. But it's still, and I would argue, it's still God's world, and we're still part of it, and we still reflect His image in our humanity, which is whether that's interesting. Okay, so fascinating. Thank you for at least going there. I don't know if you get hammered on like ethics of for people asking about that all the time, but I think it's something not only that I know our audience would be interested in, but I'm always kind of curious about the next kind of wave and how do we think about this, because it really does matter. We have to ask why and should we as we do these things as well. So that's I'm glad to hear that, kind of your thoughts on that. Okay, so let's say somebody decides to invest in Capsho and they're like, hey, I'm going to get this, I'm going to make my podcast faster, I'm going to show notes and the honey trap and all those things. What are the first couple of steps that you would tell them to do in order to get the most out of it?
Oh, yes. So we actually have a free audio mini course that can actually step you through how to use Capsho to get discovered, and that's to get discovered through a search, in-app search, but also search on Google. And we also have another audio mini course that can talk you through how to get yourself visible on the likes of social media with what Capsho provides. Just going through those, I think, would be such a quick way. Like they're literally under 30 minutes each. So it's like a really quick way to get just, start to get indoctrinated around what it is that we're trying to do and how powerful this stuff is from a marketing perspective. So yeah, that would be my recommendation, is almost get in on those mini audio courses. And Eric, I can give you the links for that as well to share with your community. But then just start doing it, using it, because Capsho is actually, I would say it's pretty intuitive. I don't know, Eric, do you think it's pretty intuitive to just like
I think
upload your episode? And,
it's pretty easy to learn how to do. But I was curious if there's things that you're like, okay, this is the right thing. So that's cool. All right. Yeah. So one last thing I want to touch on before we wrap up here. I love also that you guys are building a community. And so recently you've done some cool things. We talked about Capshovian, which is a cool term as well, but you recently, and I think you're making a splash on this a little bit. You sent out to people like physical things in the mail, right? You sent out some stickers.
Yes.
I've got mine over here, a coaster and things, which is super cool. Like to get physical mail and just to send out some things. And that's creating this kind of feeling of like, hey, we're all together and like this is a community. Tell me about, because I think there's a lot we can learn from you in that. Tell me about kind of why you're doing those things, and then what we can learn from your approach to taking care of your customers in that way.
Yeah. And shout out to all the Capshovians on here. Thanks for saying that you're a Capshovian and someone already has a sticker on their laptop. They like super shout out. Again, I can't see your name. It just says Facebook user, but it's super cool to have so many Capshovians on here. So grateful for you. So I, hey, Al. Yes. Yeah. So cool. Okay. So what does this come back to? So basically for us, when we really thought about what is it that as founders of Capsho, what's our vision, like what we want to be creating, there's a couple of things that we are so passionate about. One is that we want our Capshovians to succeed. That is, at the end of the day, like the number one thing. So we have monthly, like we're doing literally every month, we have a challenge that all of our Capshovians for free can go through so that we can help them find success. So we do our Nerd Out Thursdays that, again, any of our Capshovians can hop on and ask their questions and get help and all the things, like just as many things that we can do to help our Capshovians succeed. We are so passionate about that. So it was one thing. And the second thing was because we are just, you can probably tell from like definitely my personality being here and stuff, like we're kind of like hopefully fun, energetic people. And we were like, we want to be able to, therefore, like we want to bottle that up, and how do we use that to delight our Capshovians? So we want our Capshovians to succeed, and then we want them to be delighted in the process, because there is no better feeling than that. Imagine being able to find success, but just having fun along the way of doing that. And so when we were like really honed in on that is our vision, we just went all in on, okay, how do we delight our Capshovians? And our 1-year birthday was coming up, and we were like, you know what? We could make this about us and the fact that we turned 1, but how do we make it about them? How do we make it about you? How do we make it about our Capshovians? And that is how it all kind of snowballed from there. And, the mail outs are cool. We're going to hopefully do more of them. We have heaps of things planned and coming. We made a really funny welcome video that we're going to be sending out soon. It's just, it's been a lot of fun to just go all in on this.
I love that. Okay, that's exactly the right posture to take. And friends, you can take this in your podcast as well with your audience. How do you make it about them, not about you? I know it's tempting when you're sharing on social media and whatever to ask the questions about your show and all that, but make it about what your audience thinks about what you're talking about your subject, about your guest, whatever. You're going to see so much more traction. That's how it works. That's good. Not only service, but it's also just great marketing, right? Because you're drawing people in. Love it, love it, love it. Deirdre, thank you so much. I really appreciate you being here to share some of this with us. Very helpful. I think a thoughtful conversation, and I'm grateful that you were here. People can find, if they want to sign up, to capsho.com, and they can get that there. And then I think we'll have a link or something for them as well. Is that right?
Yes. So to get in on the audio mini course, go to freegift.capsho.com. So freegift, one word, .capsho.com. And then anyone in Eric's community, we'll have another link, Eric, that you can share with them so that they can get a bonus surprise as well.
Perfect. That will be great. Deirdre, thanks so much for being here. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.